Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, so I'm Uri, and people also call me Uri Go. And lately, people started calling me NG Jesus, which is super embarrassing. So I wrote the Angular Meteor library, so you could use Angular with Meteor and Angular 2.0 with Meteor. And I also recently wrote, with a lot of help from the community, the Angular Apollo library, which lets you use GraphQL with your Angular applications, with or without Meteor. So so this talk will be only on GraphQL and how you can use it with Angular and why you should use it. So just a question, who of you heard about GraphQL? Okay, a few, and who of you uses GraphQL or tried GraphQL? One, okay, two. Good, so for me it's nice because the first time, I always say that the first time I gave a talk about Angular was at Google and nobody knew what I was talking about. And then the first time I gave a talk about Meteor, it was also in a conference and nobody knew what I was talking about. So now it's the same thing with GraphQL. So I guess I like the tough crowd. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what is GraphQL. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about why should you care about it. And then I'm going to dive deeper and also show you code examples and how you can use it in your existing Angular apps like right now, today. So GraphQL is a application query language which was developed by Facebook. And Facebook uses this query language since 2012 when they did the large transition from web applications into native mobile applications. And so, and where it goes to this layer of GraphQL, let's say this was the old stack of Facebook where you used to have they used to have a web server, they send HTML like a normal old web application, like the Facebook web application. And they did all kind of tries, like how they could reuse the code, but still not write everything in native. They didn't do that. Eventually, they went into just using a native apps, completely native apps, with and serving data between those apps. Now, the thing is that for them, the app server, and there's a lot of code in Facebook, there's a huge amount of code, they didn't want to rewrite their old backends. So they needed some kind of layer to go in between the native applications and the current, let's say we'll call them old backends. So they could, the native application could be fast and also could be, they didn't have to rewrite any code. So that's when they invented the GraphQL and started using that. Now, before they invented GraphQL, they tried to use REST and also FQL, which is maybe some of you back in the day used to work with Facebook API, heard about it. But they settled on GraphQL, and I will show you later on in the talk why they did that and why REST wasn't appropriate here. Later on, they took the same approach that they did on the native apps, and they moved it into the browser and to use with React. But those concepts we can use, those concepts and those technologies we can use the same with Angular, and definitely with Angular 2.0, which sits on the same principles and concept as React. So again, they used to have a lot of existing code, and that is based on, there's user database, and there's all kinds of services they use, and GraphQL just sits on top of that. It's not a replacement for, it's not like a new thing. You don't need to replace your service with it. You can just take your old backend and put this layer on top of it between you and your front-end apps. So just a little bit about how it looks, and later I'll dive more into that. That's like the hello world of GraphQL. I want to query something, and for me, that looks like the most natural way that I want to query. I want to take a user, which is me, and I want to get the name. And when I want to get it, I want to get it in the same structure. So the response would look like that. And for me, that looks so much simpler than query. If you think about REST, start to think about all kinds of, the queries on the URLs and all kinds of different URLs that you need to query. Basically a mess. So another example is that you can query for a specific user with using parameters. Or later on, you can actually, let's say you want to get the user, but you also want to get the profile and like inside data from it. So I will just describe it, and I will get the data in the same way. And the important thing is that it will be with one request. So the best example for that is, let's say I'm querying my friends, and I want for each friend to get his name and a profile picture. So I don't need like REST. I would like send a request, get all my IDs of my friends, and then I will need now to query again, and for each friend, what did I get? With GraphQL, I can do it in once. And when I'm working with mobile applications or with slow networks or just modern web apps, I expect it to be fast. I don't need to rely on the network. So that's like a very brief overview of GraphQL. But why should you care? Because we are front-end developers. We write our code and let the back-end guys do whatever, or people do whatever they need to do. Just they serve us like a REST endpoint, and we'll be fine. So let's say we are now, let's say I'm a consultant in a company, or let's say I'm an employee in a company, and we have this existing application. Let's say it's like a business app, and I don't know, we have a backend with .NET or Java or PHP. And then one day the boss comes, and he says, OK, our app looks old. I want the app to look modern. OK. So what does the boss mean when he says, I want the app to look modern? So I Googled, I put in Google a modern business application. So that's like the first picture that I got. So probably, maybe your manager, that's what he expects when he says a modern web app. Probably he doesn't know really what he wants. But basically, if we're thinking about what a modern web app means, it's more something like that. And this is Asana. This is a very rich web application that only in the initial load, like it loads a minimum amount of HTML, but it loads like data, and loads the root are based on let's say a front-end framework like Angular or React or any other front-end framework. But also there's more clients. Now suddenly we have native applications or just mobile applications that are also used with Angular, let's say native script or React Native or whatever, or Ionic. So we need to start thinking about more devices, and we need our applications to behave like applications. So it's less about links and forms and like refresh buttons. Like we need modern UI. We need people don't use the refresh button anymore. Like if your app needs a refresh button, then your users won't be happy probably. But the good thing is that we're Angular developers. We know all about it, right? Like let's use the latest things. Let's and also sorry for my poor graphic choices. I'm really bad at those, but bear with me. There's worse to be seen in this slide. So we know how to make everything modern, right? We can and I'll show you, I'll go through a bit of what does it mean to write an advanced Angular app, although you know it already. But again, when you talk about the challenges that we face when you write a modern web app, first of all, there's a lot of new front-end patterns. Some of them you heard earlier today, Redux, and putting everything in a component, state management, immutability, new types of routers. That's one thing. The other thing is that we have multiple clients, and some of them runs on slow networks or slow devices, and they share they have overlapping features, but sometimes, let's say if I'm on mobile, I don't want to get some of the information. I want to get maybe a little bit different information. So again, we kind of know how to do that, right? Okay, let's add a router, and let's make everything like lazy load, and let's use CS6 or TypeScript with ES6 modules, and let's put everything in a component, and let's manage the data outside of the components, like you heard today with Redux or NGRX or whatever you like to do. and move into one-way data binding and use smart and dumb components, and your app will be super fast. And then you would call the server. Okay, so now you need to call the server. You're super happy, you finish your job, but you call the server, you don't know what you will get back. Like the challenges that we usually, as Angular developers, we face the same challenges when we start like rebuilding our apps. So let's say we're having like a .NET backend or a Java Spring backend or PHP or whatever. There's few problems most of us face when you start to talk to the backend. So first thing that like people, now I rebuild in the app, now I want to call a REST API. Usually I'm calling an endpoint, I have no idea what will I get back. Like there's documentations, tools for REST API, but the REST API itself is not self-documented. So, if someone needs to write the documentation for those endpoints, probably it will be outdated. If not in a week from now, in 6 months from now. Most of the backends that we work with are not Twitter. They don't have a very nice website with documentation. So that's one thing. The second thing is that with REST, there's a problem where let's say we need, like I said, like few pieces of hierarchical information. So I need my name and my picture, but then I need my friends, and I need my friend's name and picture. So usually there's two choices that we can do here. And the choices are not good choices. Like one thing we can do is like, let's create like a generic API that fetches, everything. I'm calling like that API, and I will get, let's call that endpoint user and its friends and its name with a picture. That's the name of the REST API, and then I'll call that generic API, and I will get like this thing, which probably holds too much information than what I need. And if I'm on a mobile device, it's going to be slow. The server is going to take time to fetch all that information, even though I don't need that. If I have few components, like we just said that we're now separating components, but let's say there's a few components that each component needs different type of information, they will call that same endpoint again and again. So now we need to start managing our data. We need to see, wait, did we fetch the data or not? And even if we fetch some of the data, we will still refetch the whole data because it's one big, huge REST endpoint. So that's one choice. The other choice is, okay, let's do a very specific type of endpoint. Like I said, I want to get just the user and just I'm gonna have like specific feature API for each thing that I need from the server. But then the API documentation will probably look like that. I will have tons of REST endpoints. And the first problem, of course, is that we need to maintain all those endpoints. The second thing is that probably once I'm calling let's say I'm calling the friends list, and then I'm taking the picture, and then I'm taking the name, I need to start doing joins on the client, which probably, from what I've seen during the years, this is like one of the most common best practices that I see on Angular apps. Like we fetch all kinds of stuff, and then we do tons of joins and data logic on the client, which probably we shouldn't do. And the other problem with that is that it means that every time we need a new feature, we need some guy from the back, or some person from the backend to develop this thing. And usually, they're not so eager to do that. At least from the, let's say, quick survey I made with backend people. So I'm also a backend people, so it's okay if I'm gonna laugh about them. And that was all about just regular data fetching. I haven't even started thinking about live data, which we have more and more requirements and more features that require live data that are updating all the time. And REST doesn't have any solution for that. So, like I said before, REST fails us in many of those cases. We don't have typed APIs. We have no idea what we will get from the endpoint. We have a lot of poor choices to make. Like, do we get all the information and have multiple, like tons of endpoints, or we get specific information and then do a lot of joins in our client side. And another thing is that when we work with REST and we work with a lot of endpoints, so if the data is not self-described and I don't know what will I get, then let's say I have a tree of components, and I'll show that example in a minute, and the top component takes my friends and their names, and the son component, the child component gets my friends and their pictures. It will be very difficult for me to start managing like all those requests, and probably I will do too many requests to get this information. So from all the problems which I'm sure most of you have met when you work with like existing backends, it looks like we rethought a lot of things on the front end. Like front end, everything is fine. We have like amazing best practices and everything is wonderful, but maybe we should rethink the way we fetch data as well from the server. Like all those great things doesn't mean much if the server is slow and if we don't get anything from the server. But that's like where our data source is coming from. So let's try to imagine how would be the future of REST. How would be the future of the way we fetch data? So first of all, if I want data, I want to describe it in the most natural way that I can. So kind of like a graph, kind of like a JSON object that like just it's my name and then my friends, and under the friends I can get my things, and when I get back the response, it will look the same. And also I want to fetch, to query it once and get one request. I don't want to start managing joins on the client. And I also probably want a single endpoint. Like I don't want now to deal with a lot of microservices and a lot of backends. I want to have single place where I query everything and it brings it to me. I don't need to care about everything else. Now, before we reimagine all of those and start implementing something new, it's good because Facebook had the same problem. And usually if you have the same problem as Facebook, you're in a good place. So Facebook themselves, like I told you before, they met the same problem, and then they invented GraphQL to answer that problem. So what is GraphQL? It's a nested query language. Like I showed you before, you just describe what is the data that you want in the most simple way, and you will get the data exactly like it looks. You will get it in one round trip. And that's basically, and you have like, I'll go now a little bit into it, and you have parameters and you have types, and I'll show all of those features now. So let's look at an example. Those are mountains, and this is my example. Okay, so what I'm doing right now, and this is a very risky thing that I'm doing right now because all of you are on the same internet as me, and the internet is super, super slow. So I want to query a database, and that database, or a server, and that server holds all the information about Star Wars in the world, like all the movies and all the spacecrafts and all the heroes and everything. So let's say I want to query something. So I want to query a film. So I'm just going to query a film. And I have few choices of how to query a film. And I'll talk a little bit later about how is that editor that you see right now is working. And this is the editor for me writing queries for my backend. So I don't know if you have those type of tools when you're working with a backend. And so I have a film ID, and let's give it one. And let's say I want the film's title. So let's query and hope that the internet gods are working. And yes, we got the response we got, and this is a real response. I really went to a server that holds that information. But and that's fine. Like that's an easy way to do regular request, but it's not groundbreaking. But if you look here, you can see that I have automatically all the information that the server can provide me. So let's say I queried for a film, but let's say for the film, I want to get, let's see, we have a film and film connection, and for each film, I can get, let's say, all the starships in that film. So first of all, let's add another thing, like director of the film. So now, by the way, if I ask for it, I will get exactly what I wanted. The backend didn't change anything. And then I'm going to query the starship connection. Starship connection holds inside starships. And I want to get the name of the starships, okay? So again, this is a nested field that I want to take, and it's one round trip. I didn't need to do few round trip to take that. But okay, I want the starships. So let's say inside starships, I want to take the, I don't know, let's say I have the name of the pilots, right? So let's create pilots. Let's get the pilots and let's get their names. One round trip, and some of them doesn't have pilots, but they fly alone. But some of them has pilots, and you can see that the Millennium Falcon has like Chewbacca and Han Solo, and this is again one request. And again, nothing changed on the server. Think how many REST endpoints would that be? But let's go deeper. Okay, I have pilots. Let's go, I don't know what else there's in Homeworld. Okay, like, like name, model, starships, I don't know. No, we're at pilots now, sorry. So let's go into pilots. What do we have with pilots? Again, so I have no idea. I'm just like, I don't know, whatever. You can ask like for any information that we want to know about Star Wars. So pilots, it's a person, and a person has a home world. So let's query the home world and the name of the home world. And again, if the internet gods are working, and it's working, and by the way, it's probably best that it's GraphQL, because if it was few REST requests, it probably would take forever, then I can also see the home world. So that's everything. That's everything I needed to do, just describe the data. Now, if I'm looking at what I'm actually querying, this is the Swappy API. This is the Star Wars API. And let's look at the documentation of the Star Wars API, which probably took a lot of work to create. Think how many endpoints I have here. It's like infinite amount of endpoints. Go figure that out, right? Like, I had no idea what I was doing, and I have everything I need. So think about, first of all, how quick it was, and think about how easy it was to just create a query. So let's go back a bit. I hope you can see everything. Okay, so now after we modernize our app, we did everything, and now our app is super useful and everything. We can also add a modern data fetching for our app. And this is I think I'm putting it out there because that's probably would affect most than all of those other things that you can do, which you should do. You should use immutability, and you should use Redux or NGRX or Relay or whatever you want to use, but probably the time that it takes you to develop the connection to the backend and also to just fetch the data, like it hurts a lot your modern app. So what happened here is that we actually created a modern app. We have modern client-side tools. We have modern data fetching. We're decoupled from the server. Like, as you saw, GraphQL is like a layer in the between. Like, I didn't need the backend people to do anything. And I separated myself from them. I took responsibility of how do I query the data and how do I manage all the services that I have. And I became the hero of my company, because now I create the modern app. And I don't care if the backend people will take more time to develop their things. And maybe later on they could write a GraphQL server themselves, but I don't care about that. I can write this thing myself. So again, like some of the misconceptions of about GraphQL is that it's not a storage engine. It's not query. It can query a database. It can query Mongo or Postgres or MySQL or SQL Express or whatever. But the thing is that each field there is a function. So I can, if I'm querying my name, I'm actually, the backend is having a function to fulfill that name. So it can go call a database, but it can also call to a REST endpoint, or can just do whatever logic I want it to do. And there's implementation for GraphQL for Java, for .NET, for Django, for Ruby, like probably JavaScript, of course, everything that you need. And so yeah, you can just leverage your existing code. It's not something that it's not something that replaces your existing code, like I showed you here in the Facebook slide, which is a slide that I stole from Facebook. So when they present GraphQL, this is what they do. So more features about GraphQL is that it holds types. So I can query a type of a person, and then I can reuse that type person everywhere I want, if you saw in the example before. But also, if I have types, I can do validations. So I can now, before I even like go into production, I can make sure that the queries that I write are according to the schema that the server provides me. So I'm preventing a lot of the bugs that happens when you send a REST API request and you will get whatever. Saves tons of time. But also, it's not only a query language. It does everything that REST does. If I want to create it's also, there's mutations and actions, so which basically is another name for calling functions on the server. So like I'm doing a post request, I can do the same here, but the cool thing about it is that it looks nicer, and also the response, like I described how do I get the response from a query, I can describe how do I get the response from my action. So the return value is my choice, not the backend people choice. And it supports real time, which REST doesn't do, and it keeps improving. So I don't know when was the last time REST improved, but this thing keeps on improving, and there's huge community behind it, and it's not only Facebook. Twitter is using it in production. In Meteor in our Galaxy service, we use that. So it's already wide in use in production. It's not like a new thing. So how to start? Pretty simple. So I don't think I have time to live code it, so I'll just show you the code, but I have here an Angular2 app, which, yeah, no, this is not an Angular2 app, this is a mountain. Again, but this is an Angular2 app. Can you see that? Yeah. So, and it's a very simple app because that app just, it fetches like my friends with their picture and information, and then their friends. So I have two implementations here. One is in REST and one in GraphQL. So let's look at what happened to the network when we went to REST. So look how many requests. First of all, I'm getting the profiles. Can I increase that size? Yeah, okay. So I went to the profile, I got my list of friends, but I got their IDs. So afterwards, I need to query them again, right? But it's just one, it's the same tree of components, right? Like it's two different components, I'll show you in a second, but there's the list component and then there's the individual person component, but each component queries like everyone tells us, yeah, we need to like separate, each component should have its own data requirements, but then that's what happens. We're querying twice. But if we go into GraphQL, clean the thing here, and fetch the same thing with GraphQL, you see that we have one request, and that request all the friends, and all the information that we need. Full name, ID, title, okay? In one request, and you saw it was quicker as well. And I'm not kidding, like this example that I showed you before, I couldn't refresh even, I tried to just log into GitHub before, and the network here was too slow, but this thing worked. Because I need one simple, one request to work, and that's it. All the logic and the things runs on the server, and this is the meaningful thing. Okay, so how does it look in our app? So what do you need to do that? So first of all, the only thing you need to do is to do npm install Angular2 Apollo, which is the library that we wrote, so you could use that. Or if you want to, I don't know, to get the documentation, you only need to Google like GraphQL Angular, or just Google Apollo Angular or whatever. Then you get the npm version, and then you will get, just like, I don't know, if you used Firebase or something, so you will get a provider. Wait, how does it? Okay. So you get a providers like that you need, and let's compare the code. So I have here a service, like I wrote a nice code, I think, right? I have a service that calls REST endpoints with the new HTTP, Angular2 HTTP thing, with observables and everything, but it's one, it's one call, so I'm converting into a promise, and I have, all and single. Like, give me all the profiles and give me single value. So if I'm going to the list of REST, so on init, I'm getting all the people and putting it into profiles. That's pretty simple. But then I have another component, the friends list, which is, again, it's like the super simplest component in Angular 2. And I'm just taking the list of friends that I got from the parent component, and I'm querying the single one. So that's fine. It's a nice app. It works. But like you saw, I need to start doing a lot of thinking. First of all, I need to have a service that I can think, if I didn't do it here because it's a lot of work, but what data do I have? What data don't I have yet? Which components are rendered right now? Maybe there's a different set of root components that are rendered right now. But let's compare it into GraphQL. So I have a list, and it's the same component. So the only thing I need to do is I need to query the profiles and what I need to know about them. And let's say in the list, I only need to know the ID. I don't need to know more, because I don't know, with the parent component, I don't know what will render in the list. But in our friends component, I know that I need to take the full name. So what's happening on the back is that because GraphQL is a self-describing schema, we know that what is the tree of components that is rendered. We know how to mix those queries together and merge them into one single request to get exactly the data that you need, not more, not less. And I didn't use any service or anything like that. So by the way, there's a lot of information about those things in the GraphQL, in the React world. So there's no reason why we shouldn't use that also in the Angular world. So that's it. That's like the only thing you need to do. Just Google Apollo Angular or Angular GraphQL, and you'll get exactly the guide how to do that. And it's very simple, and there's a lot of examples. So some questions that people ask me when they first hear about GraphQL is like, wait, isn't it like a React thing? So no, you just saw that Angular, first of all, Angular 2.0 is very similar to React, but in the concept that it takes. But you just saw, this was an Angular example. With Apollo client, you can use it with whatever front-end framework you want to use. So no, you can use it with any front-end framework you need, even just like plain JavaScript. Then people ask, is it a relay thing? So relay is a client that sits on top of GraphQL, but even in the, so you could use relay if you want, but relay is not fitted to Angular. And Apollo is fitted to Angular, and also right now we're seeing that there's more and more people leaving relay and using Apollo, because Apollo is simpler, it's based on Redux, and just even people in React are migrating into Apollo client. Another question, is it a JavaScript thing? No, you have clients for your .NET backends, for your Django backends, like whatever you need. So just Google GraphQL and whatever language you want to use, and you will get the client. And another question is, should I change all my apps? So no, you can, like in that app that I showed you right now that app runs some REST queries and some GraphQL queries. So you can migrate like let's say your slowest network, you can start migrating and do it gradually. So maybe now I showed you enough, so you can just Google this thing and try it out. That's all I ask for you to do. That's usually in my talks, that's all I ask people to do. Just Google and try it out. So let's summarize. And again, sorry for the horrible, horrible graphics. So it's a new standard. It's a new and better standards for your apps. REST is good for many types of scenarios, but probably if you're writing an app, whether it's a web app or a mobile app, probably for your specific scenario as an app, GraphQL is better for you. And you can use that to modernize your company even if you're using existing old backends. So you separate yourself from the limitation, you use your existing code, you take over control, because one of the ideas of GraphQL is that you, as a front-end developer, describe the data. So, and if you think how products being developed, then it's the product managers or the designers, they think about the data that they need and the component, and then they describe it, what they need, and then it goes to the server. It's not the other way around. Right now, we're walking the other way around. We're asking, what is the, we're asking the server people to tell us what is the data. It should be the other way around, and GraphQL takes us there, so you get more control as a front-end developer. And yeah, you get to be your hero of your company with Angular and GraphQL. So thank you. Just if you want that information, just Google Angular Apollo or Google Angular GraphQL. I also want to thank, I didn't do it alone. There's a lot of community that helped me doing that. And our top contributor is Camille, which is doing so much work. And I want to thank him here. And yeah, and thank you. Questions? We have time for questions? Time for questions or no? So there's no time for questions, but if you have questions, tweet me or just Google it and file an issue, so your questions will be answered and people all over the world would know what's the answer for your question. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Uri.